Hello, students. You're welcome to today's lesson on punctuation marks and their functions. I am Rameso Adeyemo with the brand name English with RMG, and this video is proudly brought to you by IOTA Virtual Learning Platform. In this video, you are going to learn all you need to know about punctuation marks for you to become an effective writer so that you can write excellently and pass across the exact meaning you intend in your writing to your reader. Also, you would learn how to write effectively and excellently so that you can excel in your written English examination. So, are you ready to learn with me today? Get your writing materials, stay tuned, and let's begin. So, this is the part 4 of this series that I made on punctuation marks. In the previous series, we've discussed different types of punctuation marks, the end marks, and now we are on the internal marks. Remember that I said that all punctuation marks can generally be divided into two. The end marks, which are three: full stop, question mark, and the exclamation mark. And then we have the internal marks. Now we are discussing the internal marks, and we've discussed the apostrophe, the quotation marks. Now, let's continue with the colon. So, why do we need to use the colon in writing? Or what kind of meaning do we use the colon to communicate in our write up? So, the colon introduces various items, examples, and longer passages of discourse. What do I mean by that? I know that many of you students are familiar with defining some concepts, like maybe you want to define biology. You write biology and then you put your colon in front of it, then you write the definition. That means that you are using the colon to say that whatever it is that is coming after what I've written before is an explanation of what I've written earlier. I know that you are familiar with this function of colon. However, let's look at the functions of the colon. Are there any more functions rather than this? So, function 1, we have to introduce a clarification, an explanation, or an expansion of the preceding clause. So, this is just like what I've explained earlier. When you want to say that what is coming next is an expansion, an explanation, or a clarification of what I've said before, then you can use the colon to signify this. Are you following? So let's look at a few examples. I have three favorite cities in Africa: Lagos, Accra, and Cape Town. So this is like an explanation of what I've said or an expansion of it. Just saying three favorite cities is not enough, but when I'm able to expatiate by saying the names of these cities, it's more like an explanation of what I said earlier. So you can use the colon for this function in your writing. If you want to make more clarification or a better explanation or an expansion of what you've said earlier, you can use the colon. Example 2, we have the company's goal is simple: to provide excellent customer service. So most times you will see some firms or establishments and you will see motto, then you see the colon, then they write maybe knowledge is power or whatever it is that it is their motto. Do you understand? So it's like explanation or expansion of whatever it is that they are trying to say. So example 3, we have the recipe requires three essential ingredients: sugar, butter, and flour. So still on explanation, clarification, or expansion. So function number 2, for the colon, we have to introduce a list or a series. So this is also a common function of the colon. I don't know how often you use it. So, but when you want to introduce a series, you can use the colon. So let's look at a few examples. I need to buy the following groceries: milk, eggs, bread, cheese, and granite oil. So it's like still an explanation, but here it is a series or a list of whatever it is that I have said. Do you understand? So groceries include milk, eggs, bread, cheese, and granite oil. So example 2, we have the conference will cover several topics: marketing, sales, leadership, etc. So sometimes when you want to make a list of whatever it is that you said, several topics is one topic. So marketing, sales, leadership is just like examples of it. Do you understand? So a list of it, you can use the colon to introduce it. Example 3, we have the examination consists of 4 sections: math, English, science, and history. Still on using the colon to introduce what? A series based on what I've said earlier or what is being said prior to the use of the what? The colon. Do you understand this function too? I hope you do. Function 3, to indicate ratios or proportions. So this is what we do in arithmetic, mathematics generally. Or we can also use it to explain whatever ratio that we are trying to put in our writing. So for example, we have the company's profit margin is 3:2. That is the proportion of what? 3:2. So colon is the punctuation that is used in mathematics, or even when you are trying to just explain something in English that is in ratio, to indicate what? Ratio. Example 2, we have the recipe requires a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to flour. So when you're trying to explain something in ratio, you use the what? The colon. Example 3, the game score was 5:2 or 5-to-2. Do you understand? So this is another function of the colon. So function number 4, we have to separate titles from subtitles, indicate volume and page numbers or cite references. So this is a function that we do in writing in order to acknowledge um, someone who has written something. So when you are writing from a textbook, you need to acknowledge that, oh, I got these words from this particular textbook, and this textbook is written by this particular person. If you are just preparing for your WAEC, I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, but let's look at a few examples. Example 1, we have book title, The Great Gatsby, a novel. So let's say you've quoted something from The Great Gatsby. You also need to acknowledge it in your write-up, and you need to write it in this format using the colon to introduce the title and the novel. So example 2, we have academic paper, Smith J 2020, colon, the impact of climate change. So this is like referencing. You need to always respect the person and the book, the title of the book that you've written whatever concept from, especially when you are writing it exactly the way it has been written in that book. If you don't do that, you can be charged for plagiarism. That is stealing someone else's intellectual property. Do you understand? So it is not, if you are not really familiar with it, because I'm not sure, not all SSE students are already familiar with making references when they use concept. But most times, if you are quoting someone, that's why they said, for example, when you say according to Mark Johnson, for example, you could say economics is defined as so so so. You are referencing that Mark Johnson. Do you understand? So now let's look at a practical question from our past question, how we can use the colon in answering some of our written English examinations. So we have WAEC 2018, section A, question 2. The question reads, write an article suitable for publication in a national newspaper on the high cost of living, suggesting at least ways in which the government of your country can tackle the problem. So this is the answer that I've come up with. We have the high cost of living in our country has become a pressing issue, affecting millions of citizens, colon, those struggling to make ends meet, families sacrificing essentials, and individuals facing financial uncertainty. The relentless rise in prices of basic necessities has left many wondering how they will provide for their families. So we said that we can use the colon to introduce a clarification or an expansion or an explanation of what we said earlier. So when I said that the rising cost of living has affected millions of citizens, now I want to expand what I mean by affecting millions of citizens. How is it really affecting them? So I need to make an expansion of what I've said. So I use a colon to introduce that expansion by saying, those struggling to make ends meet, families sacrificing essentials, and individuals facing financial uncertainty. Full stop. Do you understand? So, this is one of the ways to use the colon effectively in your essay. When you want to introduce an explanation or you want to make a better clarification of what you've said, do you understand? You can use the colon. So, let's look at the second paragraph that I could have in answering that previous question and how I can use the colon effectively in this paragraph. So we have several factors contribute to the high cost of living, colon, rising inflation rates, increasing food prices, soaring house costs, and high unemployment rate. So we also said that we can use the colon to introduce a what? A series or a list. So when I say several factors contribute to the high cost of living, so what do I mean by what are these factors? Now I want to list them. So by listing them, instead of saying they are, I could just use the what? The colon. Then I start writing my list. Rising inflation rate, increasing food prices, soaring housing costs, and high unemployment rate. Do you understand? So this is just some of the ways you can use the colon effectively in writing your English examination answers. However, I would like you to note that when you use the colon in concept like this, you do not need to use are or were. Or once you use the verb are, or when you say they are or they were, then you don't need to put the colon after it. You would see that in those two paragraphs that I gave you as example, I didn't use her. I just go straight to putting the colon there. The colon is like replacing they are or they were. So it's either you use the colon or you use they are. Are you following? So don't confuse it. Or when you say they include, even when you say they include, you don't need the colon anymore. Are you following? So please do not mix it up. I hope you can use the colon effectively in writing your examination, or even if you are just writing a paper or whatever it is that you want to write. It's all about writing English effectively. So now let's move on to our next internal punctuation mark, which is what? The semicolon. It is very closely related to the colon, especially with the way it looks. But let's look at the functions. So we have the semicolon is an internal punctuation which calls for a pause that is longer than a comma and shorter than a full stop. So, in essence, the semicolon is like in between the comma and the full stop. It is quite longer than the comma, but it is shorter than a full stop. So, now let's look at the functions of the semicolon. What kind of meanings do we use the semicolon to communicate in writing? So, function one, we have to join two independent clauses, that is, complete sentences that are closely related in meaning together. So when I say independent clauses, what do I mean? I mean that these are clauses that can stand on their own and qualify as a sentence on their own, simple sentence most times. Do you understand? So, but they are kind of closely related in meaning. So instead of us to now have sentence splices where we just have short sentences, then you can just join the two together with the use of what? A semicolon. So let's look at a few examples. Example one, we have, I have a big test tomorrow, semicolon. I'm studying all night. So instead of saying I have a big test tomorrow, full stop, I'm studying all night, full stop, you can just use the semicolon to separate the two. Are you following? So that you can show that there is a close relationship between these two clauses. Are you following? Example two, we have, the city is known for its beauty. Tourists visit it annually. So there is a relationship between a beautiful city and what? Tourist visit. It is closely related. So I can just separate them with a what? With a semicolon. Instead of using a semicolon, sometimes you could use a conjunction as well. Do you understand? So if you don't want to use a conjunction, you could use a semicolon to join two independent clauses like this together. Are you following? So example 3, we have, Tayo played soccer his sister played basketball. So as I was saying earlier, instead of saying Tayo played soccer and his sister played basketball, that would be correct as well. I'm using a conjunction and. But if I don't want to use the conjunction and, I can use the semicolon. Are you following? So example 2, we have to separate items in a series or list that is particularly long and already has internal punctuation marks. So I would want you to pay close attention to this function of the semicolon. Sometimes we have long sentences. One of the definition of a sentence is that it begins with a capital letter and ends with a what? An end mark. So a sentence can be as short as just three words rather, or just two words sometimes. And it can be as long as a full page, half a page or even a full page, short page. It all depends on how well you can use your punctuation marks to communicate. So when we have long sentences like this, sometimes we already have comma in it, but we have other concepts that we want to explain. We can use the semicolon to do what? To communicate our meanings better. So let's look at an example of what I'm trying to say. Look at the sentence. We have the university offered courses in mathematics with topics including algebra, geometry, and calculus, computer science with focuses on AI, machine learning, and data analysis, and engineering with specializations in mechanical, electrical, and civil. So look at this sentence now. We are trying to say that the university offered courses in mathematics, computer science, and what? Engineering. However, we also want to expatiate on the type of topics that they have in what? In mathematics. So we also listed the topics. And while listing these topics, we already used the comma to separate them. Algebra, comma, geometry, comma, calculus. Do you understand? So now we want to mention another thing that now we are no longer talking about mathematics. We want to talk about another subject. And we do not want to end the sentence yet. So we use the semicolon to separate it from the next concept. So mathematics ended with what? Calculus. So we separate that with what? A semicolon. Then we have computer science with focuses on AI, comma, machine learning, and data analysis. Now that is the end of examples of what? The computer science. So we also separate it with another what? Semicolon. Then we move on to engineering. Do you understand? So because we already have comma in between, we cannot continue to use the comma. So we can use the what? Semicolon. Do you understand that concept now? So now let's move on to the next function, which is to separate independent clauses with transitional phrases in the middle. Now, in the previous video, I explained the essence of transitional phrases. Do you understand? We called it introductory elements. I also called it transitional phrases. So now, sometimes these transitional phrases are not just in the beginning of sentences or in the beginning of paragraphs. We could also have it in the middle. So let's look at a few examples. We have the team worked hard. Consequently, they won the championship. So now, the team worked hard. We separate that with a semicolon. Consequently, comma, they won the championship. So these are independent clauses. They won the championship, one clause. The team worked hard, one clause. So, but we want to tie them together to show the relationship in between. So we include a transitional phrase in between and a semicolon. So the semicolon can also be used as this function. Example 2, we have the company invested heavily. Nonetheless, their profits decreased. So we could have the first independent clause, the company invested heavily. The second one, their profits decreased. But they are being tied together with the words, the transitional phrase, nonetheless. But it is being separated by what? A semicolon. So you can also use your semicolon to perform this function in writing. Example 3, I have, he applied for the job. Semicolon. Meanwhile, comma, he continued with his current job. So this is another way or another function of the semicolon in writing. Are you following? So now let's move on to our next punctuation mark, which is the ellipses or the dots. Students abuse this punctuation a lot, and I would like you to master how to really use it. So let's continue in the next part. You can click on the screen if it's popping up to continue watching, or you can go to the description below to click on the next video so that you can learn how to use all your punctuations effectively. If you have any question, do not hesitate to put it in the comment section. I'll be glad to answer all your questions. I'll be glad to clarify whatever confusion you are having with punctuation or any other topic in English. Once again, this video is proudly sponsored by IOTA Virtual Learning Platform. So subscribe and tell a friend to tell a friend. And hi, I'm Rumeso Adeyemo with the brand name English with RMG. So if you are yet to subscribe or like, kindly do so. And please share with your friends and family. Let them benefit from this video as well. Thank you. See you in the next class. Bye.